Welcome, 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 everyone. I guess we'll get started. Thank you for attending our webinar. I'm Sutherland. I'm president and founder of Ed Technology Funds. Ed Technology Funds is an E-rate consultancy. We've helped applicants through the E-rate funding process since 2010, and I personally have been involved in the E-rate program since 2001. Today, we're here to talk about an app that we created to help applicants through the E-rate funding process a little bit easier. Specifically, we're going to talk about this app, ErateDocX, and how it can help you get through your funding year 2019 PIA review questions. With that said, I'd like to introduce our other panelists. I'm delighted to have Diana Zerillo on the phone with us. Diana is a former PIA reviewer, and she has a wealth of experience on the PIA review process. She has served as not only a PIA reviewer, she's been a team lead with USAC for answering PIA review questions. For sending out PIA, various levels of PIA review questions. She's currently an E-rate consultant for Ed Technology Funds, where she specializes in helping our clients through the PIA process. Also joining me today is Reginald Myers. Reginald is our marketing and communications manager. He is also a project manager for ErateDocX. He has a ton of experience with helping applicants understand how to use ErateDocX for various interfaces to the E-rate program. With that said, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Reggie so that he can go through a few housekeeping items.
All right, thank you, Beverly. And again, thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping items before we dive into the topic. On your screen, when you bring your mouse to the bottom, you will see an option for Q&A. Clicking that will bring up the Q&A dialog box. We encourage you to ask any questions that you have in that box throughout the webinar, and we will answer as many of them as we can at the end during the Q&A segment. Please note that we won't be taking any questions through the chat function or the raise hand feature, only the Q&A. Also, I want to let you know that we are recording this webinar, and the recording will be made available to you after the webinar through email. In addition, the recording of this webinar will also be hosted on edtechnologyfunds.com for you to view on demand. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn this back on over to Beverly Sutherland, who's going to go through the agenda.
Thank you, Reggie. Again, thank you all for being here. Again, today we're going to talk about using the app ErateDocX for responding to your funding year 2019 PIA review questions. We're going to first start off with just talking about the need for storing your E-rate documents. Why do you even, need to store them? Diana is going to go through a couple of samples or examples of actual PIA reviews and accessing the documents in support of responding to those PIA reviews. Diana will also give you some tips and best practices for efficiently getting through the E-rate review process. Along with that, Reggie will give a demo on the ErateDocX app, and we'll wrap up with some questions and answers. And we'll also share with you some information on how you can utilize the app for free all the way through the end of this fiscal year. With that said, I'm going to turn the the presentation to Reggie for our first polling question.
All right, thank you, Beverly. So before we jump in topic, and we want to go get some information from you. Right, so our first polling question is going to be, where do you currently store your E-rate documentation? You guys will have 1 minute to answer this question, and then we're going to review the results. If you guys choose B, none of the above, please submit the answer, but also let us know through the Q&A function where you are currently storing your E-rate documentation. Okay. And it looks like we had some answers coming in already. Okay. It seems a lot of you are using a digital service. Okay. All right, you guys still have a few more seconds to answer. All right. And with that, time is now up. Now here are the results. Okay. So out of the attendees that answered, 78% of you are currently using a digital documentation retention system such as Dropbox, Google Drive, or similar service. 11% of you are still using filing cabinets or folders. That's an interesting one. And I also see that someone chose none of the above. Let's see where they chose to store their documentation. Okay. And they didn't say. All right. All right, well, now that we have gone through our first polling question, we're going to go back to Beverly Sutherland so she can go over ErateDocs.
Thanks, Reggie. That was very interesting, though not surprising. Most people do use some form of cloud-based storage for their E-rate documents now. We hope that we can give you an additional tool to help you with storing those documents. So the big question that we get oftentimes is, you know, why even retain E-rate records? And specifically, after a couple of years, most people tend to lose track of where their documents are. But the reality of it is that the FCC has included in the modernization order that went into effect in 2015 that documents must now be retained for a period of 10 years. 10 years at the end of the first funding year. So if you receive funding in 2019, your 10-year period will start July 1st, 2020, and you must retain your documents all the way to 2030. So the reality is that those documents may be required to answer questions that can be answered during that 10-year period. Other reasons why you want to retain your documents is that a lot of your schools and libraries are going through rapid infrastructure expansion with the plethora of online tools that are being used, curriculum, and new services that are being offered to your for your operations as well as to your library patrons, and just being able to keep up with that expansion in the way of keeping track of what is where, your asset registry. That is another reason to retain the records. Another important reason is that many schools and states have a retention policy that is much less than 10 years. In some states, financial data is only required to be retained for 5 years. And so what happens is those systems are sometimes purged or archived, where if you get a review asking for an invoice that's outside of that, you know, after that data has been archived, then you may not be able to easily access it. Storing your documentation is also a great way to have a more organized and efficient interface to answering questions for audits and reviews and vendor payment history and all of those things. So there's a lot of reasons on top of the FCC 10-year requirement that schools and libraries are now looking to aggregate and track their documentation. The other part of this is that there is the PIA review process. Pretty much most applicants go through the PIA review process. Currently in 2019, there's about 70,000 different FRNs that are under review. Most of those reviews are in the initial review stage, although some of them have already been escalated to final review or have expired their 15-day window, which means that the funding could possibly get denied. If your 15-day window is expired, that means that perhaps you have not responded, or maybe you need additional time and haven't requested that yet. So there's every year there's the review. The PIA review process requires lots of information to get to the point of your actual funding being awarded. And ErateDocs is a way to help you archive those documents in a way that the information is available year over year. Again, ErateDocs is a cloud-based documentation retention system. It's specifically designed for the E-rate program, where we have an advanced tagging system that allows you to tag the documents based on the category of information that's being archived, whether it's your USAC form or your competitive bidding data or your contracts with your vendors. As you progress with your funding, after a couple of years, some of the most important data has to do with your invoices and whether or not you've made your payments. So we have an advanced tagging system that allows you to tag the files based upon the category service that it is, or the category of the step of the E-rate process. ErateDocs is, the documents are highly secured and encrypted. It's backed by Amazon Web Services, which is a trusted cloud-based service that many of your large SaaS applications are stored on. We have put a lot of thought and a lot of time in trying to design this app so that it is something that makes the program a lot easier. We recognize that this is not an easy program, but we think this tool can help. We leveraged our years of experience as an E-rate consultant helping applicants through this process, and we've gone through a lot of different levels of leveraging knowledge throughout the E-rate community to try to have something that's easy to use and and low cost as well. Again, ErateDocs is a cloud-based records management system. It is intuitive with a simple dashboard. Everything is centralized into one management platform. It's scalable, unlimited number of users with your subscription, unlimited storage capacity, very easy to add new users in a matter of a couple of clicks, highly available with multiple data centers throughout the country. We use high levels of encryption, as well as hashtags to ensure that all the data is secure and safely transferred to the cloud and to and from your computer. If there's more questions on how this app actually works, you can visit ErateDocX.com. Under the FAQ section, there's lots of information. Now we'll dive in a little bit on the ErateDocX app and using it for the PIA review questions. And I will now turn the call over to Diana to go through a couple of examples and demos with you.
Thanks, Beverly. I want to thank everybody again for joining us today. First, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the PIA review process. So for most applications, PIA is a three-step process to verify information on the Form 471 for compliance with program rules and policies. The three steps would be initial review, where the reviewer is going to check discounts, validate entities, validate student counts or square footage, ensure the entities don't exceed their Category 2 budgets, and confirm funding requests meet a threshold, and if not, get documentation to support the amount. Then it would go into a final review process where the final reviewer would double check the initial review for any mistakes, and then quality assurance will check to ensure that neither the final reviewer or the initial reviewer failed to follow program procedures in determining their decision for funding, whether it be approved or denied. So how is a PIA review determined? The type of review an application goes through is determined by dollar amount of the application and an internal process in EPIC to check for inconsistencies and discrepancies. Inconsistencies and discrepancies cause the system to generate the PIA review so that the reviewer can clear any issue or reach out to the applicant for any information necessary to help them clear that issue in the system. Applicants need to be prepared to answer questions pertaining to the eligibility of the entities receiving service. PIA will check to see if the entity is maybe a NIF or if it can be found in the state valid file or the IMLS spreadsheet for libraries, or they're going to reach out to get documentation that demonstrates the entity meets the statutory definition of an elementary or secondary school in the No Child Left Behind Act for a school, or if a library is eligible for assistance under LSTA for libraries. They're also going to check the eligibility of services requested. Is your FRN for eligible services? And can it be supported by documentation? They also check your discount calculation. Has there been any change in the discount or student count or your square footage from a previous year? If so, and they can't reconcile that change by using resources provided to them, which would be valid file or IMLS spreadsheet, the reviewer will reach out to the applicant and give them a chance to support the numbers that they changed it to. So you definitely want to have your documentation on hand that you use to calculate your discount. Category 2 budget calculations. Has your entity exceeded the amount of your budget? Your budget lasts for 5 years, so you need to ensure that spending over the 5 years stays under the amount of your budget. Competitive bidding process. Did you follow a fair and open process? Was your Form 470 or RFP posted for 28 days? And did you choose the most cost-effective option? You want to have documentation on hand to back all of that up. And lastly, contracts. Have your contracts been signed and dated before the close of the 471 window, but after the close of the 470 28-day window? And do they support the amount requested on your funding request? So now I'm going to turn it over to Reggie briefly so he can demonstrate to you how ErateDocX works so you understand how you can use it for PIA review.
Great. Thank you, Diana, for your overview of PIA reviews. Now we're going to quickly go through the ErateDocX system so I can show you where the documents you'll most likely need to answer reviews can be found. So ErateDocX makes it a breeze to answer PIA review questions with this highly organized system that stores your E-rate records by category. First, when you get to ErateDocX, you'll click on the login here, and then you enter in the email. As well as a password to enter the system. Now, once you've logged in, you'll be taken to the dashboard. You'll select the funding year that you are being reviewed for, and then you'll see 9 categories where your documents can be uploaded to. Now, for PIA reviews, the bulk of the documents that you will need to answer inquiries will be stored in the application process section. This is where you will keep information such as your National School Lunch Program forms, your school enrollment data, library IMLS data or architectural drawings of new branches, entity validation data, Category 2 budgets, letters from the state E-rate coordinator, and more. Once a PIA review question has been answered, I would highly recommend that you use the application process section of ErateDocs to store the answers to these questions as well, in case you need to pull them up later. Now, while most of the documents that you'll need for PIA review can be found in the application process section, there are other sections of ErateDocs you can store documents that you may need as well. One of the common areas that you'll be asked about during a PIA review is competitive bidding process. ErateDocs has a category called bidding, where you store all of your data for the competitive bidding process. So that is things such as vendor quotes and bid evaluation matrices. You will store them in the bidding category. Also, you may be asked a question that will require you to pull up a contract or a recent bill. Contracts should be stored in the contracts category of ErateDocs. We can find most recent bills in the invoices and payments section of ErateDocs. Please note that the contract or contracts used to establish, annual or multi-year funding requests, as well as the bills that are used to establish month-to-month requests, can also be stored in the application process section as well. As the PIA review process at its course about verifying the information on your Form 471, you may need to reference it in order to answer some of the inquiries. All SEC forms that you file can be stored underneath the forms category in ErateDocs. And there you can find all the forms, including your Form 470 and Form 471. All right. So that was just a quick overview of where you can find documents in ErateDocs to answer your PIA review questions. But now we're actually going to go through a couple of examples so you can see how this works in real time. Diana, are you ready with the first question?
I'm ready. So let's take a look at 2 examples now. Our first example is a common question from either a Category 1 or Category 2 application, which would be eligibility of products and services. The questions are going to be exactly the same for both categories when it comes to eligibility of products and services. And basically what the reviewer is looking for is any type of documentation you can give from the vendor to support the amount that you requested in your funding request. So here we have an example PIA review where the FRN is for $3,200 and the reviewer is asking to please provide vendor documentation which supports the funding request for $3,200. So you can use ErateDocs to provide the response to this question by finding the document you used to create your funding request. Examples of documents you could submit to the PIA response for this is a vendor bill, which will pull up the vendor bill that belongs to this PIA review, where you can see that the actual billed amount is $3,150. So when you submit this for PIA review, they're going to lower it to that amount. And the vendor bill can also be tagged in ErateDocs just as that, copy of bills used for month-to-month service. It's just based on your preference how you want to tag it. And then we also could submit a contract in this case, which you could also tag as copy of contracts used for annual or multi-year service funding requests. And then this would just be an example of the contract that might support the FRN. So our second example is going to be a very common question for Category 2 applications. This question allows you the opportunity to fix an entity that's over the Category 2 budget. So for this question, the reviewer is going to give you the information, what your budget is, what your total spending was over the past 5 funding years, and exactly how much money you are over your Category 2 budget per entity. And they'll do this on a spreadsheet typically, where they will break it out by FRN and funding year for you so that you can see exactly what you spent and how it is in comparison to the budget you're allowed for that entity. So now going back up to the question, the reviewer is going to attach that spreadsheet and then ask you to either reduce the FRN, remove the entity from the FRN, or cancel the FRN. So the documentation that you might need to help you respond to these questions are your budgets per entity within either your school district or library system, so that you can check and confirm that PIA has your funding history correct. Sometimes they might get it wrong. You might have filed a Form 500 to cancel an FRN, but it's showing as spending. So you can either correct the reviewer and show them proof of the Form 500 so that you can prove that you're not over budget, or you can use the budget spreadsheet just to kind of see what you have to work with in reducing the FRN. This is an example of a budget spreadsheet you might set up by entity for your school. It basically shows the inflation number and the student count so that you can come up with the total pre-discount budget for the year, and then it breaks down all of your spending, and then the remaining budget would be in the last column. So you know exactly what you have to work with per entity. We'll show you an example of a library too, since it's a little different, only in that it goes by square footage, locale code, and a different inflation number. So here it's $2.44 per square foot. And a second option that you might need to pull up in order to check how to respond to this question might be a vendor quote. This way you can go line by line on your FRN to see where you might be able to reduce quantities or just take some of the amount away from the funding request in order to bring your entity under the budget. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Reggie for our second poll question today.
Okay. All right, so now that we've gone through two common examples of PA review questions that you'll get, we have one more poll question for you. Okay. All right, so our second poll question that we want to know from you guys is, what is the most difficult question for you to answer during a PIA review? Just like the last one, you'll have a minute to answer and then we'll review them. If you guys choose none of the above, please submit your answer and then tell us in the Q&A portion, what is the most difficult question for you to answer during a PIA review? Okay, we got a couple answers coming in. I see a few none of the above. Guys, please remember to enter in your actual answer of what is the most difficult question for you to answer during a PA review and using the Q&A. Okay. I'm gonna allow a couple more seconds here. 3, 2, 1. All right, and time's up. Let me share the results with you guys. So the most difficult question for the majority of you who answered at 38% is the FRN reduction is due to being over budget. That's interesting, and it's closely followed by cost allocation for equipment and services. We have a couple of none of the above. And then last but not least, we have the entity validation at 13%. All right, let me see. All right, so now that we know what is the most difficult question for you guys to answer during the PIA review, It's now time for you guys to get some best practices. So I'm now going to turn this back over to Diana, so you guys can learn some of the ways to more efficiently answer your PIA review questions.
Thanks, Reggie. To ensure that you're ready for a PIA review, you want to make sure that you have uploaded the following documentation into ErateDocs before you file your application. This way you don't require the entire 15 days you're given to respond to the PIA review. With all your documentation in one place, you should be able to respond to the reviewer the same day your review is received. So you want to have your NSLP claim forms or any financial aid applications, or if you use the survey method, make sure you block out your student information. Anything that you use to calculate your discount, you want to make sure that you have a copy of it and it's signed at the bottom. And then you also have a letter on school letterhead signed by a school official with their title, just restating the information on the document. You also want to have documentation that validates your entities. A letter from your E-rate coordinator, maybe if you have a copy of the state valid file from the E-rate coordinator. You could also find it for some states on your state education website. And any State Department of Education documentation that you might have that validates your entity. Verification of your student counts and your square footage if you're a library. You can find this for schools in your valid file. For libraries, it would appear on the IMLS spreadsheet for all libraries. And if you're a Catholic or charter school, acceptable documentation is a snapshot of your attendance from any date before the window closes, showing your highest attendance. You also want to sign that snapshot and accompany it by a letter on school letterhead, signed by a school official with their title, just restating the student count that's on that document. Your monthly bills and contracts that are going to match what you requested on your funding request. You could also upload a copy of your contract in EPC and associate it with your FRN. So if it matches, the PIA reviewer can just go look there. If it doesn't match, because let's say you're asking for taxes on maybe your internet services and the amount on your monthly bill is different than your contract, you want to definitely have your monthly bill on hand so that it supports the amount that you asked for on your FRN. Budgets per entity, like we showed in our prior example, these will let you know how much you have left to spend per entity in your school or your library system. And vendor quotes. This is going to help you go line by line to reduce the cost for any entity you might be over budget with. You also want to be able to respond as soon as your questions are received. With ErateDocs and all of your documentation in an easily accessible place, you should be able to just submit the response to the reviewer as soon as you receive it. Also, you might want to contact your reviewer immediately for clarifications or if there are any questions, because sometimes USAC questions aren't as clear as we would like them to be. So contacting your reviewer for clarification will ensure you that you respond to the review questions appropriately and avoid any incomplete response or maybe a denial. Ask for extensions if additional time is needed. Extensions are a tool given to us to help respond appropriately. Don't hesitate to use them if you do not feel that you will have all documentation readily available for your response. I'm going to hand it back over to Reggie now so he can demonstrate the ErateDocs reports generator to show you how to follow these best practice tips.
All right. Thank you, Diana. All right. So two of the bullets that you noticed there, the first two, having documentation readily available and respond as soon as questions are received, are fantastic advice to answer your questions more efficiently. And one of the great ways to make sure that you can do that is to use our documents report generator. So in order to get to the documents reports generator, you will go over to the documents reports tab over in ErateDocs. So the documents reports generator makes it easy for applicants to get a quick view of what documentation they have stored for any given funding year. This way they can share it with whoever they need to and get any missing documentation as quickly as possible. So let's go through this really quickly. So you select the funding year, in this case, funding year 2019, and click See Documents Report. And as you can see here, you don't just get just a full list of what they have stored in the system. You also get it broken down by category. Makes it easy to view. So for example, you see here from the application process, you see that you have the income survey for National School Lunch Program. You have answers to 2 PIA review questions, as well as a contract, a vendor quote, a recent bill, as well as 2 budgets that can be used to answer questions. So you will get all of this stuff broken down by category when you use the Documents Reports Generator. Now, a great thing about this Documents Reports Generator is that you don't just have to look at it within the ErateDocs platform. ErateDocs makes it easy for you to download and share this report so you can share it with other staff members, team members, internal management, and external stakeholders as well. So in order to generate a PDF version of this report, you would click on Generate PDF Report. And doing that will give you a downloadable document to share. This way, you all will have the ability to download this document and share it with your team members, vendors in some cases if you need to get back from them, as well as internal management as well. And with that, we have concluded our portion of the best practices for ErateDocs for answering PIA review questions and how you can use ErateDocs to do that. I'm now going to turn it back over to Beverly Sutherland, and we're going to start our Q&A segment.
Thank you, Reggie. So just to recap, the ErateDocs report generator, document report generator allows you to generate the report for each by funding year so that you know 9 years from now what was filed, previously filed, and what information was used to establish funding. And that concludes the webinar, and we will now open the floor to questions that you may have on ErateDocs.
All right. So we're hoping that you guys have been, sending in your questions as we go. If not, it is not too late. We're going to try and get to as many of them as we can before we start wrapping these things up. And just so you know, any questions that we can't answer on this Q&A, we will answer through email. So let's see what we have here. Okay. So we have someone who wants to know, we review the PIA reviews, but how can ErateDocs be used for PQA reviews?
The PQA review is really a PQA stands for Payment Quality Assurance Review, and it is used to verify that you have paid your portion of the payment. If your discount is 80%, you will need to show proof that you have paid 80% of, the 20% that's required for the applicant portion. In ErateDocs, that can be done by throughout your payment process, you would along the way store in the invoices and payment section, you would store not only your bills, but your vendor invoices and proof of payment. If you go to upload a new document, and the funding year, select the funding year, and invoices and payment. And you can then select, make a copy of your check or your bank statement that will show that you made your payment to, proof of payment to the service provider. That would be one document that would be used in the PQA process. In the PQA process, they may also ask you information on how the vendor was selected and other information relevant to the establishment of that funding. All of those documents would be either in the competitive bidding section or in another category, such as contracts. If you have a consultant that's helping you, they may want to see an LOA to have that consultant assist you with your with responding to the PQA review questions. So that's just one way that ErateDocs can be used in the payment audit inquiries that you may get well after your funds have been used and services have been deployed. Could be 2-3 years from the date of those services.
Okay, that is a great answer. Okay. 1 second, I'm going to check for some more questions. Okay. So we have a question here. Is there a presentation copy available if we joined late? The presentation, a recording of the entire webinar will be available via email to all attendees, and we will also have a copy of it on our Ed Technology Fund's website as well. All right, and we have another question here. Give me 1 second. So someone wants to know if they have questions about which specific documents will answer specific PIA questions/categories. Do we provide support for their questions?
Thank you for that question. I'll answer it in 2 ways. The application ErateDocs does not assist in helping you answer the actual question. However, all of the documents you need to answer the question are should be stored on ErateDocs. Our company at Technology Funds, we do help applicants with responding to PIA review questions, and if there's anyone that needs help, please feel free to reach out to us after the call.
Thank you for answering that. So I have a question here. This person wants to know if they don't want to download a PDF version of the report and send that out, if they want someone to be able to review the report within ErateDocs, is there a way to do that? Are they able to add a new user?
Absolutely. Reggie, if you can pull up the interface for adding a new user.
No problem. Okay, so to answer the question here, you're able to add any user that you need to ErateDocs. So we know that E-rate documents come from, employees and stockholders and some stakeholders of different teams, such as, accounting, IT. So sometimes you may want to be able to share the report or for them to be able to see the report within ErateDocs, and that's fine too. The way that you would do that is you will go to the Manage Users tab here. You will click on Add New User. You'll fill in the first name, the last name, and the email address for the new user that you want to create. And you can give them like an easy password for them to remember. And then you can select a role for them within the system. So if you only want them to be able to view and download documents, you would create them as a viewer. If you need them to upload documents, you can add them as a contributor, where they can download and see all files, but they can also upload new files as well. And if you need them to have full range of the ErateDocs platform, including being able to add other users and to manage payments, then you can add them as an admin. We wouldn't recommend adding too many admins. Remember, if they only need to upload and download files, then you can make them a contributor, and that'll take care of that. But yes, you can add new users to ErateDocs instead of having to download the report and send it out.
And also, the admin user account is the only account that can actually delete files. So you definitely want to have tight control over who is allowed to delete files.
Okay, and I think we have time for one last question. So this is the last question of the webinar. So this person wants to know, how do I search for a multi-year contract from a prior year?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes you are in your PIA review, you may be continuing with a multi-year service that was started in a prior year, and you want to get access to that document without having to remember exactly what year you started the service. And one way that you can do that with the ErateDocs app is to use the search tool, and you can enter contracts or the way I would do it is go back there, under, say, all funding years, then go to the category of contracts. And then hit search. And that'll show you all of the contracts that you have stored by funding year, or if you have a specific vendor name, you can enter that vendor name and then do a search over all funding years. And that will, under the contract category, and that will display all the contracts that are associated with that vendor's name. So there's a number of ways that you can easily find, the data and the records that you need to continue with your funding in a multi-year contract situation.
Okay. And that was the last question for this webinar. Unfortunately, guys, we have to start wrapping this up. So we thank you for attending this webinar. Now, but before we start wrapping this up, we're going to give you a last bit of information we think you'll find helpful. Okay. So if you want to use ErateDocs for this year's PIA review, you're in luck. Currently, we are offering a free trial of ErateDocs from now until June 30th, which is the end of the current fiscal year. Signing up is easy. All you would need to do is go to the link below and fill out the form there. And the link there is info.ErateDocs.com/free-trial. Again, that's info.ErateDocs.com/free-trial. All you need to do is to fill in your first and last name, your email address, and the name of your organization. Once we have that information, we'll be able to process your request and to help you get going. So you've heard us talk a lot about ErateDocs, but we wanted you to be able to hear from some of our subscribers and supporters as well. We have here a couple of testimonials for you to check out. We'll give you a minute for that. As you may notice, the first one says, being the one person responsible for E-rate at my school, ErateDocs made the E-rate program much more manageable. And we know that as you guys begin to use ErateDocs and upload your documents there, you'll find it to be much more manageable as well. So if you have any questions or need any assistance with the free trial sign-up process or need any assistance with anything involving ErateDocs, you can reach out to me, Reginald Myers. My email address is rmyers@edtechnologyfunds.com. One more time, that's rmyers, M-Y-E-R-S, @edtechnologyfunds.com. And that concludes today's webinar. We thank you again for coming to join us. We hope you've learned a lot and found this information helpful. If you want to check out more about ErateDocs, you can always visit our website at ErateDocX.com. And you can use the email address one more time is rmyers@edtechnologyfunds.com if you have any questions. And with that, we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you very much.